I never expected that an ordinary Tuesday evening would turn into something so extraordinary. My name is Emily, a 32-year-old graphic designer living in a modest apartment in the city. I've always been the practical type, focused on my career and maintaining a small but tight-knit circle of friends. Among them was Daniel, a colleague from the marketing department at the agency where I work. We'd known each other for about 2 years, our relationship strictly professional at first, but gradually evolving into a friendship over shared lunch breaks and occasional after-work drinks with the team. Daniel was charming in an understated way, tall with kind eyes that crinkled when he laughed, and a quiet confidence that never felt overbearing. There was always something unspoken between us, a current of energy that neither of us acknowledged, perhaps out of fear or professional boundaries. The story I'm about to share explores how a simple gesture of gratitude can transform into something much more profound, how tension can build in the spaces between words, and how sometimes the feelings we try hardest to ignore are the ones that demand to be felt most urgently. It all began 3 weeks ago when I stayed late at the office to help Daniel with a presentation for a major client. His usual partner had called in sick, and the deadline was non-negotiable. I remember the panic in his eyes when he approached my desk that morning, asking if I could possibly help. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate," he'd said, running his hand through his hair in that way he did when stressed. I had plans that evening. Nothing special, just a virtual cooking class I'd been looking forward to, but something in his expression made it impossible to refuse. We worked until nearly midnight, ordering takeout and fueling ourselves with coffee as we refined his pitch. When the final slides were perfect, the relief on his face was palpable. "I owe you big time, Emily," he said, his voice soft with genuine gratitude. "I mean it. Let me make it up to you somehow." I brushed it off with a casual, "That's what friends are for," but he insisted. "I'm serious. Let me at least bring over dinner sometime. Or wine. You like red, right? I remember you mentioning that Cabernet at the Christmas party." I was touched that he'd remembered such a small detail about me, something mentioned in passing months ago. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant while my heart did something unexpected in my chest. "That would be nice." We left it at that, a vague promise hanging in the air between us as we packed up our things and headed out into the night. For the next few days, I found myself thinking about that conversation more than I cared to admit. Would he actually follow through? Was this just a colleague being polite, or was there something more to it? I told myself not to read into it, that Daniel was just expressing gratitude for professional help, nothing more. Yet I couldn't help but notice how our interactions at work had subtly shifted. Lingering glances across the conference room, his hand briefly touching mine when passing documents, standing just a little closer than necessary when discussing projects. Then came the text on Friday afternoon. "Still good for me to bring over that wine tomorrow? Say 7 p.m. My fingers hovered over my phone screen for what felt like minutes before I typed back a simple, "looking forward to it." And I was looking forward to it with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that made it hard to focus on anything else. I spent Saturday in a state of nervous energy, cleaning my apartment more thoroughly than it needed, changing outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater that a friend once told me brought out my eyes. I arranged and rearranged the throw pillows on my couch, put out some cheese and crackers, then removed them thinking it looked too planned, then put them back again. I was acting ridiculous, and I knew it, but couldn't seem to help myself. At precisely 7:02 p.m., my doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door to find Daniel standing there, looking different somehow outside the context of work. He wore dark jeans and a gray Henley that fit him well, his hair slightly damp as if he'd just showered. In his hands, he held a bottle of wine wrapped in brown paper, and he smiled when he saw me, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Hi," he said simply, and somehow that one syllable carried weight. "Hi yourself," I replied, stepping back to let him in. "Come on in." As Daniel entered my apartment, I became acutely aware of how personal this space was. My books on the shelves, the throw blanket my grandmother had made, the half-finished painting on an easel by the window. It felt intimate in a way that our office interactions never could, allowing him to see pieces of me that didn't exist in our professional relationship. "Nice place," he said, looking around with interest. "It feels like you. Warm, creative, thoughtful." The compliment caught me off guard. and I felt a flush creep up my neck. Thanks, I managed. Kitchen's this way. He followed me to the small but open kitchen that connected to my living room. I brought this, he said, unwrapping the wine bottle. It wasn't just any Cabernet, but an expensive one from a small vineyard I'd once mentioned loving. The fact that he remembered not just that I liked red wine, but the specific vineyard I'd talked about in passing nearly a year ago, made something warm unfurl in my chest. You remembered, I said softly, taking the bottle from him. Of course I did, he replied, his eyes meeting mine. I remember a lot of things about you, Emily. There was a moment then, a charged silence where neither of us seemed to know what to say next. I broke it by turning to grab my corkscrew from a drawer. Should we open it now? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. That's why I brought it, he smiled, moving closer. To thank you properly for saving me last week. That presentation went perfectly, by the way. We got the account. That's fantastic, I exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. You did all the hard work, though? I just helped with the finishing touches. Daniel shook his head. You're always doing that, downplaying your contributions. You're brilliant, Emily, and you never give yourself enough credit. His voice had dropped lower, more serious, and he'd moved closer to me in the small kitchen space. I focused intently on opening the wine, suddenly finding the simple task requiring all my concentration. Do you want to grab glasses? I asked, nodding toward the cabinet above the counter. They're up there. He reached past me, his body close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and subtle that I'd noticed at work, but never this intimately. As he set the glasses down on the counter, he didn't step back, instead remaining close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. You know, he said quietly, I've been wanting to find a reason to spend time with you outside of work for months now. My hand stilled on the wine bottle. You have. He nodded, taking the bottle gently from my hands. Let me, he said, and I watched as he expertly removed the cork. The small pop seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. He poured 2 glasses, handed one to me, and raised his own. To colleagues who become friends who become. He left the sentence hanging, a question in his eyes. Who become what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Daniel took a sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving mine. I did the same, the rich flavor barely registering as my mind raced with possibilities. When he set his glass down, he moved even closer, gently taking my glass and placing it beside his on the counter. Emily, he said, my name sounding different somehow in the quiet of my kitchen. I didn't just come here to thank you with wine. No, the word came out breathier than I intended. He shook his head slowly. No, I came because I couldn't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just professional admiration or friendly affection. Before I could process his words, he moved forward, gently pressing me against the counter. Not forcefully, but with clear intention, his hands coming to rest lightly on my hips. The kitchen island behind me left no room to step back, though truthfully, retreating was the furthest thing from my mind. Tell me if this isn't what you want, he murmured, his face now inches from mine. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment. I could feel the cool granite counter against my back, contrasting with the warmth of Daniel's body nearly pressed against mine. I could smell the wine on his breath, see the question and desire mingled in his eyes. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain he must hear it. In that suspended moment, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What about work? What if this goes wrong? What if this changes everything? But cutting through all those concerns was a simpler, clearer thought. What if this is exactly what I've been wanting too? I didn't answer with words. Instead, I closed the small distance between us, my hands finding their way to his chest as I pressed my lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if we were both giving each other a chance to reconsider. But when his arms wrapped more firmly around me, pulling me closer, any hesitation dissolved. The wine stood forgotten on the counter as the kiss deepened, months of unacknowledged tension finding release. His hands moved from my hips to my back, drawing me against him as my fingers tangled in his hair. The counter pressed into my lower back, but I barely noticed, lost in the sensation of finally acting on what had been building between us for so long. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against mine. I've been wanting to do that since the company picnic last summer, he confessed, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The one where I beat you at horseshoes? I laughed softly, remembering the day clearly. How he'd pretended to be offended by my victory. How we'd sat together under a tree eating ice cream that melted too quickly in the heat. "You looked so smug when you won," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "It was adorable. You should have said something sooner," I told him, my hands still resting on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath my palm. "I wasn't sure if you felt the same way," he admitted. "And I didn't want to make things awkward at work if you didn't. But after spending that night working on the presentation, seeing how perfectly we worked together, how easy it was to be with you even under pressure, I couldn't keep pretending anymore." I understood his caution. Workplace relationships were complicated, fraught with potential problems. I was worried about the same things, I confessed. "Still am, a little." Daniel nodded, taking a small step back, but keeping his hands loosely on my waist. "We can take this slow," he said. "Figure it out together. But I needed you to know how I feel." We retrieved our wine glasses and moved to the living room, sitting close together on the couch as we talked, really talked, for the first time about the attraction that had been building between us. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by more kisses and laughter as we recalled moments when we'd each noticed the other but said nothing. "Remember when you helped me fix that printer jam last month?" I asked, curled now against his side, my head on his shoulder. Vividly, he chuckled. "You were wearing that green dress that I can't stop thinking about." "I wore it because I knew you liked it," I admitted. "I saw how you looked at me the first time I wore it. And here I thought I was being subtle," he groaned, pressing a kiss to my temple. As the evening progressed, the initial intensity gave way to a comfortable intimacy. We ordered takeout, finished the bottle of wine, and talked about everything and nothing. Our families, our dreams beyond the agency, books we loved, places we wanted to travel. It felt both new and familiar, as if we were discovering each other while simultaneously recognizing something that had always been there. When Daniel finally left, well past midnight, he kissed me at the door with a promise to call the next day. After he was gone, I leaned against the closed door, touching my fingers to my lips, still feeling the impression of his kiss. My apartment seemed different somehow, as if the energy between us had altered the very space around me. That night changed everything between us, but in a way that felt inevitable, like we had been moving toward this moment since we first met. What began as a simple gesture of gratitude, a bottle of wine as a thank you, had become the catalyst for acknowledging what had been building between us for months. In the weeks that followed, we navigated the complexities of our evolving relationship with care, keeping things professional at work while exploring our connection outside the office. There were challenges, of course. Coworkers noticed the change between us despite our attempts at discretion. We had conversations about boundaries, about what would happen if things didn't work out, about our different communication styles and expectations. But through it all, I kept coming back to that moment in my kitchen, the wine bottle between us, the cork barely removed, and the feeling of being pressed gently against the counter. How something as simple as bringing wine to say thank you had finally broken through the barriers we'd both constructed. How gratitude had opened the door to vulnerability, and vulnerability had led to connection. It's been 3 months now since that evening, and while I don't know where our relationship will ultimately lead, I've learned something profound about the power of acknowledging feelings rather than burying them. About how sometimes the most meaningful connections grow from simple acts of appreciation. About how the spaces between what we say and what we feel can eventually become too small to contain the truth. The bottle from that night sits empty on my bookshelf now, a reminder of how quickly life can change when we allow ourselves to be honest about what we want. Daniel teases me about keeping it, calls me sentimental. Maybe I am, but every time I look at it, I'm reminded that sometimes the most extraordinary beginnings come disguised as ordinary moments, like someone bringing wine to say thank you, and finding the courage to say so much more. Looking back, I realize now that what happened between us wasn't just about attraction or chemistry. It was about recognition, seeing and being seen by someone who understands you in ways you might not even understand yourself. It was about the courage it takes to cross the invisible lines we draw around ourselves, to risk rejection for the possibility of something genuine. And perhaps most importantly, it was about timing. How sometimes we need to wait for just the right moment for things to fall into place, for courage to outweigh caution, for gratitude to transform into something deeper and more lasting. Sometimes, all it takes is a bottle of wine, a quiet kitchen, and the willingness to acknowledge what's been there all along. Total _char_count, 17,896.